You good?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So this is Jackie, and I am here with Matt Thin Lear. How are you doing today, and where are you today?
I am in my apartment in Astoria, Queens. I just got done shopping, hopefully for the next couple weeks. And I think I'm struggling to figure out how to approach the rest of my album release process, as I'm sure you've heard from a lot of people today.
Well, that was kind of the impetus behind why I started doing this. And this is my first day, and I've talked to 8 different acts about kind of how this is all really sort of shaking down, because nobody knows how to prepare for something we've never done before. So where are you within your album cycle right before, let's say, 2 weeks ago?
This is a really good idea what you're doing, because I'm curious to watch it myself to see whether it's just like I'm in a sea of confusion. So I'm working with a label called Egg Hunt Records. It's an excellent label. They've worked with Lucy Dacus and a few other songwriters that I really love, and just felt like I had the opportunity of an indie lifetime in working with them. And then we released a single in February, and then another at the beginning of March, and stuff started to get weird. We were initially planning on releasing a third single at the beginning of April, and then the album at the end of April. But we talked at the end of last week and just said let's push everything back to July. And even that, it seems like still stuff. It's not going to be the same, but it has to come out sometime. So we're trying to figure out how to re-strategize. And one of the things that I'm finding kind of challenging, just because I was trying to figure it out a second ago, is like, how do you sell something when people are worried about their health?
Right.
And it feels I've always sort of struggled with this in general, but like I'm not a natural salesman. So when something is, I am a natural artist and songwriter, but those are different things. And I think in a normal time, I'm always uncomfortable selling something. And now especially, I feel like it's so intrusive to be like, I hope your 60-year-old uncle is okay, but also check out my new single. Like it's a little, it feels insincere, or so I'm just trying to figure out how to approach this whole thing. And even pushing the album release back to July, I feel like stuff is still going to be, people are still going to be reeling, even if we're able to go outside in a month or two. Like it's going to be like the day after tomorrow. Like we're going to be kind of squinting in the light. So challenging to figure out not just what the album release approach should be, but how do you approach your fans or new fans, or people that you're trying to get to listen to your songs, because it feels so trivial.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the question that a lot of acts are kind of dealing with. It's like, well, yeah, talking about my new album. Some bands had albums that came out like today is, New Music Friday or last Friday. And like, it does seem kind of like, yeah, we're worried about our health, our well-being, our jobs, like our livelihood. So this doesn't seem like I should be talking about this. But on the other hand, I would argue I can't think about that 24/7 because I'm going to go nuts. And I'm a teacher. I'm, knock on wood, I'm still getting paid, even though kids are not back in session. I can't guarantee that's going to be as long as this goes on. But I have it pretty good. But I'll still argue the other side that I need that distraction. I think we need to think about something else every once in a while. So while it might seem, and now granted, thankfully my family's okay, everybody's healthy, so I don't have those other things. So I can't say how someone who's like really in the thick of things would feel, but I would say that the majority of us are so freaking anxious, and us anxious people are more anxious than we already are. So like, what else can we do? If I can't, go to the gym, and I can't go to the mall, and I can't watch a movie, I can still listen to music. Like that's one of the joys you can't take away from me.
That's true. Yeah. They'll pry it from our grip.
Yeah, so I would encourage you to, while it's not so much like the sales pitch, and I totally get you on that, but still to reach out to fans and just say like, hey, if you need a break from everything that's heavy, like, let's go there.
Exactly. That's the only way that I think I can proceed right now and I just, I'm starting to do that on social media again, but to present everything with like, I know you might be really in the thick of it right now, but like this is something that's important to me that might be important to you, and just try to make it as personal as possible and sincere as possible, which is always a struggle on social media. How do you be authentic? What does that mean to be authentic on social media? Some of those things are like antithetical to each other sometimes, but yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I'm trying to, for me, before I can move forward, I have to think about, as another anxious person, from one anxious person to another, like this kind of thing can sort of send you off the rails, right? Just in your own mind. And I had to think about, before I took one step forward, like, why am I even doing this? Like why is this so important to me? Not just making it, because you can make stuff in a vacuum, but why is it important for for other people to hear it and to put this much effort into other people hearing it? And I needed to sort all that through in my mind before I could do anything, to put another single up on streaming or whatever. Like all of that had to happen first in my mind. So the last like week or so, I've really been thinking about that, and I came back to the conclusion that you came back to, which is, as I was thinking this through, I was listening to a record, and it didn't even occur to me that I was doing that, just because it's so natural. I was listening to. You ever heard of Karen Dalton?
Mm-hmm.
She has just like a voice that is just like breaks you open, and I was listening to her the record with Something on Your Mind and all these great songs on it, and Take Me, and that song came on, that song Take Me, and I was like, oh, like this is why I do this. Like I crawled inside of songs as a child to feel comfortable and to lessen anxiety, and I started writing songs out of that same feeling. So once I made that connection, I was like, oh, okay, like I feel comfortable doing this again, and if anything comes off as insincere or as put somebody off, I don't mean it, but I know why I'm doing it again, which is important. And I think if anything good comes out of this, it's that, for bands and a few other songwriters I've been talking to, like that sort of mindless slog of like single album, play a bunch of shows, do PR, like that whole thing, like this sort of takes us out of that and says, well, what if all of that was gone? And you could only record and you could only show it to people that you care about, and maybe you're in the same apartment as you, would you still do it? And I think if the answer was yes, like for the people who said yes, they're the ones who are probably going to make it out of this okay.
I like that. And I think it's also really helpful to fans to know that like they're not alone in their anxiety and their dread and whatever feelings that they are feeling, because we're all in really similar positions, whether we're being forced to self-quarantine or shelter in place or whatever they're going to call it next week. Like we're all feeling similar feelings. And even though I'm living in an apartment outside of DC by myself, it feels very isolating. But to talk to a bunch of people all literally across the world that are saying, I'm freaked out too, I don't really like to admit it, I don't really like to talk about it, but I'm freaked out too, is actually oddly reassuring.
Sure.
And it's kind of unifying in a way too.
Yeah. I haven't been, I have to say, super excited with the way people have been acting here in New York. I think there are some folks who are trying to stay inside, and I know there are a lot of people who can't because their jobs won't let them. But then, you hear about people kind of just going out and hanging, and that is disappointing because it's not them probably who will.
Right.
The brunt of that, it'll be older folks, people with pre-existing conditions and things like that. So it's really sad to see that.
So things have sort of been like you've got the brakes pumped on your music, but talk about the album that you're kind of in the process of releasing eventually. What are some things that kind of influenced your songwriting?
Well, I would say, this particular album was more personal than any other album because it started to take shape out of dreams I was having. And in particular, you ever heard of someone named Netta Fornario?
No, I haven't.
You ever heard of Aleister Crowley?
No, I suck.
No, I don't think that's the proper response to not.
No, I don't think so.
Aleister Crowley is like he's like one of those occult dudes from many years ago. Black Sabbath or Ozzy Osbourne had a song about him. It's like he's one of those, like, they called him the wickedest man in the world or whatever, and he was like one of those kind of occult magic type fellows. And I know he still has adherents today. And I'm not super into it. I mean, it's interesting to read about. I don't subscribe to it. But I was reading a story about one of his disciples, this woman, Netta Fornario. I think it was like 1920s or 30s or something like that. And she felt that she was under psychic attack. And then she moved away to an island off the coast of Scotland called Iona. And she kind of freaked everybody out when she arrived and was like, I'm under psychic attack. And she had to, kind of quarantine herself in the hotel she was staying at. And then they found her the next morning on the shore, and she had died of exposure. So of course, like, newspapers got a hold of it and they turned it into this sensationalized, like, true crime thing, kind of how we would do now, like a Netflix special of like, oh, yeah, ghosts, or like, like that kind of thing. But I heard that story and it was just like, oh, that's mental illness. Like I just latched onto that. And I think that story is probably like a Rorschach painting for anybody who looks at it. But for me, I looked at it and thought, okay, I understand what that impulse was, like the kind of fleeing people who care about you and isolating yourself. And I started to think about her story in connection with what artists do, which is that. I mean, you isolate yourself and you get really fixated on the one thing, and you might not come out the other side. And we've seen it happen to so many of our beloved songwriters. So I made that connection, and then I started dreaming of this person, which is not a typical thing for me. It's not like I dream about 19th century occultists often, but I started having these dreams, and I would wake up and be like, it felt like somebody else was there with me in that dream. So I started writing out of that, and a lot of the songs came out of this idea of the artists isolating themselves and the danger in that, and how each time you go out and you keep going out further and further, will you make it back home each time? And it is the process of recording an album, especially when you're doing it kind of on your own, managing the whole thing, and like financially, is it going to work? And artistically, are you going to come out with something that you were happy with? And taking some people along with you, but ultimately, whoever has the vision is the one who's kind of hanging out there. So I really identified with this story, and a lot of the songs came out of that. In particular, the first track on the album, which was written for her, and it's basically like it's her story and how we're all sort of branches off that same tree, and like all of us artists are kind of rowing out slowly to that island to go greet her.
Wow, interesting timing as well, considering everything that we're going through.
I have thought about that, yeah.
That you didn't know was coming. Mm-hmm. If anything, I like to try to find, and I'm clearly wearing a bright yellow Hope for the Day shirt nice. to kind of get my own mind that way too. But I like to think about things in a hopeful sense when possible. So what in all of this madness gives you hope right now?
The fact that people are still creating. Not the fact that people are still selling, but the fact that people are still creating. And that is important to others as well. Because I think, like, you get in that frame of mind sometimes, or maybe, I can't imagine it's just me, but you start to have that doubt of like, what am I contributing? Because sometimes making art feels really selfish. It's this need that I have. This isn't necessarily anybody else's problem to deal with. But I guess seeing how receptive everybody else is to music still and songwriting is pretty beautiful. Because it's like, all right, I start to remember that I am contributing something, even if it's to a few people. It still matters. And I think that idea can get lost in the promotion of stuff.
I like that, and I hope that will keep fueling you as these weeks kind of creep on. So thank you for kind of sitting down with me today, and I hope we can hear more from Thin Lear really soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jack. These are great ideas.